I like that matchup. Cincinnati can't stop anybody, and nobody can stop Brandon Jacobs. So put that together equals probably a big day. Number 4, I like Marshawn Lynch, second-year running back in Buffalo. I like Marshawn Lynch at home against Oakland. Now, Oakland's defense last week held Kansas City to 8 points. However, Kansas City is awful. Absolutely awful. Awful. I don't even know how else to put it. Unhitch your wagon to the Kansas City. You don't want anything to do with Kansas City. I'm telling you. And what you do want, though, is people that are playing against them because they're just bad. So don't look too much into Oakland holding Kansas City to no points. I think Buffalo, who has looked really, really good this year, is going to score probably a lot on Oakland. And Marshawn Lynch usually figures to get into the end zone if Buffalo is producing offensively, which they will this week. So I like Marshawn Lynch as my number 4 running back. And my number 5 running back, probably has the least favorable matchup out of anyone in my top 5. But he's just that good of a back. I have to put him in there. It's Brian Westbrook versus Pittsburgh. I'm sorry. He's on Philadelphia. He's just that dangerous. No matter who they're playing, just his versatility and everything he can do. He can catch passes out of the backfield. He can break tackles. He can head up the gut and take the hits. He can bounce to the outside. He can put moves on guys. Brian Westbrook is the total package as a player, and it really doesn't matter who he's going up against. He's typically a top 5 running back every week. So he made my list. I got no AP, no LT on my top 5 this week. All right, they would be right outside of the top 5. So it's not like I'm just not giving them love at all. Not that I'm saying either one of those guys are going to do bad this week. I don't even know if LT is playing. He went out with a hurt big toe, and I know it's only one toe. You have 9 more. But I tell you what, go ram your big toe into a big wooden plank or something like that. It really, really jack it up good. And then go try to run around a lot and see how it feels. You'll notice that big toe hurting then. I mean, you don't really notice it, but when it hurts, you'll notice. Anyhow, we'll see. Check up on LT if you have him about an hour or so before game time and see what the deal is. I'm not sure exactly what his status is as far as the injury report goes, but I do know that he came out last week and Sproles had a nice game, and Darren Sproles actually was picked up in quite a few leagues. Let's go to wide receivers. Number 1, making his second appearance this season, Brandon Marshall, Denver wide receiver. Again, at home against New Orleans. I like Cutler as my number 1 quarterback, and that goes hand in hand with Brandon Marshall as my number 1 receiver. I know New Orleans knows, after watching tape from last week, that Cutler's going to be looking for Brandon Marshall. But it doesn't matter, because New Orleans isn't good and they can't stop anybody. They can put everyone on their entire defensive unit on Brandon Marshall. He's still going to catch 11 or 12 balls for over 100 yards and a touchdown or 2. He's my number 1 receiver, and it's not close. Number 2, I like Plaxico Burress. All right, I'm sticking with the same kind of stuff. I mean, Giants are going to light up Cincinnati. Plaxico Burress, I think, is a top 5 receiver probably every week, regardless of matchup, judging on how good the New York Giants seem to look, and just how often Eli looks Plaxico's way. And why wouldn't you? Honestly, why wouldn't you? It only makes sense. So Plaxico Burress, number 2. Number 3, I like Anquan Bolden at Washington. And now, I know Fitzgerald is typically pegged as the number 1. The last week, Fitzgerald, even though he had a nice week, I think he had 5 or 6 catches for 150 yards or so, which is a really, really nice week. He didn't get into the end zone. You know who did? Anquan Bolden, 3 times. It's just hard to overlook that. It seems to me like Kurt Warner is looking Anquan Bolden's way. All right, maybe he's trying to keep him in Arizona. I don't know what it is, but I know that Anquan Bolden and the Arizona Cardinals are on the road at Washington. And like I said, I know Washington played New Orleans pretty tough last week, but Washington hasn't stopped anybody. The Giants hung a big number on them. So did the Saints. And that Washington defense, even though it's typically pretty good, I don't think it's going to be enough to hold Arizona, Kurt Warner, and Anquan Bolden. So I like Anquan Bolden as my number 3 receiver to probably go ahead and get into the end zone again. And I've owned Anquan Bolden before. He doesn't have a lot of... Pardon me. It doesn't seem like he has a lot of single touchdown games. It seems like when he scores in couples or threes. He's really incredible. And when he's on the field, he's a really, really dangerous weapon, and I like him as my number 3 wide receiver. Hold on. Now, how am I doing? Oh, man. I'm only supposed to have 2 minutes left, but we're going to go a little late. My number 4 receiver, another second-year guy, Calvin Johnson. All right, Detroit wide receiver at San Francisco. San Francisco seems to have trouble stopping people. It's no secret. Calvin Johnson seems to be the real deal. He had a nice week last week, and that was against the Green Bay defense. And did you see the touchdown play he made? Impressive. He's the kind of playmaker you just get the ball in his hands, and he racks up the yardage, and he makes the moves, and he does the work, and makes you look good as a quarterback. And Calvin Johnson, I think, is the real deal. I think every team this year that plays Detroit is going to have their hands full with him, but the rest of Detroit is bad, so it's okay. Anyhow, this week, though, at San Francisco, I like Calvin Johnson to have another nice week, and he comes in at number 4. Number 5, I like Chris Chambers. All right, Monday Night Football, Phillip Rivers basically has nowhere else to go. He's got Vincent Jackson, and he may or may not have Antonio Gates, but what he definitely has as a number 1 receiver is Chris Chambers. And this guy is a legitimate number 1 receiver. Do you remember last year and the year before when he was in Miami? What an awful team they were. But do you remember how you could still plug in Chris Chambers to your lineup and get decent production, even though he's in Miami catching passes from Trent Green and guys I don't even know? But still, Chris Chambers had decent production. And then he comes in last year to San Diego, and he looked okay, but he was still, kind of feeling out the system and getting his chemistry down with Rivers. But he seems to have found it. If you notice the 3 touchdowns he scored in the last 2 games, he seems to have found his chemistry with Phillip Rivers, and he's kind of the go-to guy. So listen, Chris Chambers on Monday Night Football, again, it's a big stage, Monday Night Football against the Jets, whose defense looks a little shaky. I like Chris Chambers to go ahead and score again, have another nice day. He's got a nice matchup, and he seems to be the number 1 guy in San Diego right now. So I know I'll have him in my lineup. You should too. Let's move on to tight ends, shall we? Number 1, Tony Scheffler, Denver tight end versus New Orleans. Okay, it's no accident. I have Jay Cutler as my number 1 quarterback. I have Brandon Marshall as my number 1 receiver. I have Tony Scheffler as my number 1 tight end. Denver throws the ball. New Orleans can't stop anybody. I'm not going to keep repeating that, but plug in Tony Scheffler because Cutler really seems to like him also. My number 2 tight end